Well, thank you all for being here. I'd like to especially thank our speaker, Allie Kelly here for from the Ray to share with us her expertise. Allie is the executive director of the Ray and has been the executive director since 2015. And since its inception, she has helped the organization to implement and build nearly a dozen groundbreaking, world-leading technology demonstrations, including the first solar road in the United States and the first public demonstration of a drive-through tire safety station. Under her leadership, the Ray has expanded its presence to 25 transportation agencies in more than a dozen states. And Allie has over 15 years of experience working in public policy, first as a lobbyist for UPS in Washington, D.C., then founding Georgia Watch in Atlanta, Georgia's only consumer watchdog organization. She was listed as one of the 100 women to know by Engineering Georgia in 2018, 2019, and again this year. So with that impressive resume, I will turn it over to Allie to kick us off today.
Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be with you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk about the Ray with Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm going to actually divide the discussion into two parts. The first part being the exploration of transportation infrastructure for clean energy generation. And then we're also going to talk about the layer cake opportunities for clean energy and clean transportation, and even communications infrastructure to exist in the right of way, which is otherwise known as the roadsides of the interstate system. Before I go any further, please let me give you some background about the Ray. So first of all, the Ray begins with Ray Anderson. Ray Anderson was a Georgia native who started a company called Interface in the 1970s. He was one of the original entrepreneurs, was able to introduce the carpet tile product in the 1970s first before anyone else, and really captured the market as the 1980s brought office spaces into office towers and skyscrapers. And of course, with large multi-floor office space, the offices became more modular in their layout, right, with cubicles. And the wiring needed to move from the ceiling where it had lived into the floor to enable a modular or a movable office space. So Interface, being positioned as the only carpet tile company in America going into the 1980s, was actually able to become a $1 billion global business in less than 20 years. And our hero, Ray Anderson, in the early 1990s finds himself a Georgia native, built the company from LaGrange, a Georgia Tech engineer, the CEO of a $1 billion global business operating in 109 countries. And he began to feel the pressure from the customer base, primarily the customer base on the West Coast, who was pressing to understand what was the commitment of the company. What's Interface doing for the environment? And Ray Anderson had no idea what Interface was doing for the environment because he felt that he complied by all the rules and the regulations required at the state and the federal level. So Ray started to push back, and then finally, like all great leaders, he just delegated the task of the environmental commitment of the company. He delegated that to a group of employees who then boomeranged back around and said, "Hey, Ray, why don't you kick off our first task force meeting for the environment with a motivational speech?" So Ray actually ended up with the question back in his lap: what is Interface doing for the environment? This is in the early 80s during the Clinton era. And a series of events led a book by Paul Hawken called The Ecology of Commerce to be placed on Ray's desk. Ray got to the chapter entitled The Death of Birth, and that began Ray's spear in the chest moment, what he called his epiphany about the linear nature of his own business Interface, taking petroleum products to make carpet tile, which after 10 or 20 years went into the landfill. Completely straight and inefficient line of take, make, and waste. In 1994, Ray Anderson publicly committed that Interface would go zero waste to landfill, zero carbon. This is almost 30 years ago, the original zero carbon goal out of Ray Anderson from Interface. And he also committed to more renewable energy sources for powering their business around the world and wastewater reuse. These were audacious goals for a carpet company headquartered in LaGrange in Atlanta, Georgia. The company ultimately did meet or nearly meet all those metrics by the deadline that Ray set, which was 2020. During the COVID year, Interface announced that they were carbon neutral, that they were introducing a new line of carbon positive carpet that embodies more carbon in the product than was emitted during its manufacture. And also, Interface is nearly 100% zero waste to landfill. What also happened during the time period in the 1990s and the 2000s, as Ray was cleaning up his company publicly, he documented the savings and efficiencies to Interface for each of the projects and was able to demonstrate with the data that he saved Interface more than nearly $450 million, which was substantial for a $1 billion business. And because Ray was able to actually produce the receipts for the company, right? He used to talk about doing well by doing good, right? Becoming more profitable, becoming more efficient, developing a culture of love among the employees of Interface, and developing a culture of love and a culture of activism with the shareholders and with the customers of Interface, who felt that they were a part of something bigger than just flooring. And when he was able to demonstrate all of that positive gain to the company, he was able to win over other Fortune 50 companies like Walmart, Unilever, Coca-Cola, and others. So this is our namesake. This is literally what's in our DNA. Ray passed away in 2011, and his youngest daughter, Harriet, with whom I work at the Ray, Harriet Anderson Langford, in 2014 worked with our former governor, Nathan Deal, and the state legislature in Georgia to dedicate an 18-mile stretch of Interstate 85 in the West Georgia area where Ray Anderson was born and where Interface was born. And so in April of 2014, the highway was dedicated, and Harriet, Ray's daughter, had her own epiphany about putting the name of the so-called greenest industrialist of the century on a dirty highway. And it was in 2014 that the Ray was born, with some initial research around sustainable highways. Now, this is just 6 or 7 years ago, but it seems like a lifetime ago compared to where we are now in 2021 and all of the discussion and all of the investment in electric transportation, in clean infrastructure, and in regenerative systems. So the Ray Highway, first of all, over the last 7 years, has been working with Georgia DOT and the Federal Highway Administration to build up the nation's premier test bed for sustainable, safe, and smart transportation infrastructure for a highway environment. You're looking at an overview of the work that we've done. Today, we're really going to focus on what you see at the top right of your screen, which is Exit 14's right-of-way solar. We're going to drill down into that. We're also going to talk about the larger opportunities, what we call the layer cake of infrastructure opportunities in the roadsides. But I just want to point out a couple other pieces of our work. Maybe it doesn't get right to carbon or methane emissions, but I want you to see the blue section of the highway itself. Right there at the Georgia-Alabama state line, the use of scrap tire rubber in asphalt. The Federal Highways Administration did fund a 1-mile section on all 4 lanes of Interstate 85 known as the Ray Highway. And we were able to upcycle nearly 44,000 pounds of scrap tire rubber into that paving project. Really innovative and important for us to be thinking about waste in markets for not only electric vehicle batteries, but also tires. But that's a discussion for another day. We also have connected and autonomous vehicle projects. Our connected vehicle project with GDOT is Panasonic. Our smart striping is provided by 3M. We have a tire safety check station, which should be used in weigh stations for large trucks across the country on the interstate system. Our wheelwright tire safety check station looks at tire pressure, tire tread depth. It looks for sidewalls for damage. It can do weigh in motion and tire temperature. Every time you see a rolled up tire shred, what we in the South call those rubber gators, the next time that you see one of those on the highway, I want you to think about the tire blowout that happened on the interstate that caused the dangerous circumstances that might have contributed to another crash or another fatality. Folks, these are the easy things that we should be doing each and every day: tire maintenance for safety and tire maintenance for efficiency of our vehicles. Right now on a gas powered vehicle, if your tires aren't properly maintained, you're really affecting both your gas efficiency of your vehicle's engine as well as the emissions coming out of your tailpipe. There's so much to cover here. We also have 175 kW EV charging stations supplied with power from a small solar array. But as was discussed, we're now moving technologies and infrastructure from that test bed, from that ecosystem in Georgia, of all places, into other states across the country, 15 states. The projects are really varied, right? We're meeting transportation agencies where they're at. What kind of opportunities and value are you trying to capture? What kind of problems or challenges are you trying to solve? And so in Minnesota with the DOT, we're working on a feasibility study to allow Minnesota DOT to use the highway rights of way for infrastructure like transmission and distribution of clean energy, as well as resilient fiber infrastructure for addressing digital poverty and increasing broadband reach. We've got several states we're working with on solar energy generation on the right of way. The state of Maine, Oregon, Texas, Arizona, Colorado, South Carolina, also Maryland DOT, the Indiana Toll Road, and the turnpikes in Ohio and Pennsylvania. It's a really interesting part of the work that we're doing. We also do work on innovating the use of what types of plants we're cultivating on the roadsides and why, trying to understand the opportunity for the roadside of the interstate system to be a more effective carbon sequestration or carbon sink opportunity. And that work that we're doing is with Oklahoma DOT and even Alabama DOT. I've already mentioned rubber modified asphalt. I'd love to spend more time on that, but since our time today is fairly limited, I'm going to jump into right-of-way solar mapping, a partnership that the Ray has with Esri, the world's premier geospatial planning, mapping, and analysis provider. And then I'm also going to talk about the next generation highways concept, which is really that layer cake of utilization of the roadsides for buried infrastructure, for new transmission and distribution, and also increasing broadband across the country to underserved communities in urban and rural areas of America. So let's start with solar. This is exit 14 LaGrange of Interstate 85, known as the Ray Highway. You can see this is one triangle of a diamond interchange. This is a traditional exit and entrance ramp scenario. 4 quadrants make up the diamond, about 20 acres divided into 4 5-acre areas. And what you're looking at is one 5-acre parcel of Federal Highway Georgia DOT property being in partnership for 35 years with the Southern Company and Georgia Power. This was a cleared 5-acre parcel. It was eroding. It was really not producing anything valuable for transportation other than just being an area of land that might one day be used for yet another lane. Actually in Georgia, this is a Did You Know segment, we spend in Georgia $45 million every year mowing grass on the roadsides, really making erosion worse in a lot of places, and spraying chemicals like Roundup to control invasive weed species like Johnson grass. So what you're looking at before it hosted solar panels, you can just imagine it as a burden, a heavy burden on our state DOTs to have all of that land that they've got to manage. They've got to mow the grass and spray the weeds just like your own front yard. What we've done is we've transformed really nothing for transportation into something really special for clean energy and for agriculture, because this site now hosts 2,600 high efficiency solar panels, grid connected, so Georgia Power customers are benefiting from the clean energy, and the land mass under the solar panels and around the solar panels is now planted with native and perennial flowering plants, habitat for bees, butterflies, and other pollinators, the wild pollinators that our farms need. There are blueberry farms in this area, really directly adjacent to this site. And so this is an opportunity for expensive, maintenance intensive, burdensome, and underutilized right-of-way land to be cultivated into clean energy hotspots. Now, I want to talk about the work that we have done previously with UT Austin, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of numbers at you. We worked with the Weber Energy Group in Austin, Texas at UT Austin, and we looked just at those diamond and those cloverleaf interchanges in the 48 contiguous states. And we found that there was more than 52,000 acres of roadside that was available and appropriate for solar development that could produce 36 terawatt hours of energy. 52,000 acres, 36 terawatt hours of energy, which could produce enough energy to power 12 million electric vehicles. Now, I go through that math for you because I want you to understand the larger scope, the larger opportunity, which is land close to the interstate system, developed for solar, which could produce clean energy for clean transportation in the tens of millions. So that's the big opportunity. Now I'm going to take you into the real work that the RAE is doing and can do with state DOTs, local governments, cities and counties, and turnpike tollway authorities. So Esri has enabled us, well, they've gifted us an amazing tool that they configured using their ArcGIS Pro software. You're looking at real data sets from Iowa DOT. So as I build up the value chain, I want you to walk in with me on the ground floor. The ground floor is that this is the DOT's own data sets. We're not extrapolating, we're not estimating, and we're not projecting. This is really good parcel data. So we're starting with a high level of confidence with our transportation organizations. And Esri has enabled us to look at the solar radiation based on the orientation of the land, western, southern, eastern, whatever. And they also take into account local solar radiation factors to deliver this really nifty solar radiation tool. They can also give us the economic value of the solar based on real local radiation information. And it's just the raw economic value of the solar. You know, on the grid, what's the local price that solar energy is netting or is gaining on the grid? So this is where we start. The DOT transportation organization's own data sets, local solar information on the economic side as well as the radiation side. Then we go a step further. What you're looking at is a digital surface model. So you can see that we're actually swiping the trees away. So we can look at tree cover and we can look at structures on the land, which would affect solar radiation. And you can actually see with the cream colored areas and the blue areas, that thick tree cover is what is contributing to really low solar radiation. Now, we don't want to cut trees. That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in making sure that we find the hot spots, the land that's already cleared and that has great solar radiation. And so the digital surface model, the surface nature of the land enables us to know if we have trees or structures that are going to make solar infrastructure just not appropriate, not what we want to do. And also they take into account elevation. So if I have a very steep slope, I might not be able to actually build or maintain the solar. That's the digital elevation model. And so Esri combined elevation information with surface characteristics and the local solar radiation information, and they came up with a suitability tool. Now, I'm going to boil this down for you. This takes us from what we could do, the whole universe of what we could do on the right of way to build solar energy generation, to what we should do. This allows us to rate sites based on suitability. We can give a top 10 or a top 20, and it actually sets the DOTs up, or the transportation agency up, for a lot of success, because we move away from the whole universe of what we could do, which is kind of risky because there might be trees there or there might be buildings, and we move into the land of this is what you definitely should do. And you're looking at the suitability analysis. Green means go, right? So green is highly suitable given the nature of the surface, the elevation, and the solar radiation factors that are local in nature. And then finally, this is the really cool piece. Esri developed a digital twin element to this tool. And so we can actually build a solar site onto a parcel, and then we can use an avatar to go into the site. Now, this is why it matters, because transportation engineers don't know solar. They don't really know the energy industry in general. I'm sure that there are some transportation engineers who have geeked out on renewable energy, but on the whole, in general, solar is not native to transportation engineers. And so we're de-risking this whole concept of using the empty roadside for solar energy generation by allowing the transportation engineers to lay out the site themselves and then actually bring themselves into the site. The other thing that we can do is we can plan these solar sites on hillsides like the one you're looking at in Iowa, but there is a scenic turnaround at the top of that slope. And so if I go back, this avatar is actually using a view shed analysis to see if the solar panels are blocking the view of the community member or the traveler. So the community member who stops to take in the vista and the scenery could be blocked by solar panels, and that would be a negative impact to the community. So we can actually look ahead and do some pre-planning with the community's needs in mind. Is this going to affect the community in an adverse way? And we're able to compare the economics of building the solar all the way up to the roadside and just letting it go with the scenic vista, or we can preserve the view shed and we can see how many solar panels or how many rows we lose and what that means from an economic standpoint. Now, all of us know that the economics is not the only reason why we're here. In fact, the economics are going to drive the DOTs. Let's be honest, the transportation organizations, the turnpike, the tollway, the DOTs, they want to get out of their roadside maintenance obligations, and solar is a great way to do that because the utility or the solar developer has to take over the maintenance for 20, 30, 35 years. The DOT or the turnpike or tollway or transportation agency can also actually negotiate a land fee to generate new money for transportation. You can actually lower your energy costs too if the agency negotiates a power purchase agreement with the developer of the solar site. Of course, you can also require these sites to be pollinator friendly, and all of these renewable energy sites are generating renewable energy credits, and a state DOT or a transportation agency could claw back all of those renewable energy credits and either retire them towards a goal, a clean energy goal, for example, or a carbon reduction goal, which is, really valuable like gold to transportation agencies, or the transportation agency could just sell those credits and get a little bit more money. So there's a great opportunity to diversify revenue streams from an asset that was otherwise underutilized and actually costing quite a bit of money. I'm actually going to transition out of this the slide deck, so don't be concerned. I've got a few more minutes, and I want to talk about the use of the roadsides for clean energy generation and for communications infrastructure. I'm going to go through this really quickly because I only have a few minutes left, but I think we can all agree that we're not going to be able to reach our clean energy or our clean transportation goals without expanding and enhancing the grid. If any of y'all watched John Oliver, you saw him really punch that point home last week when he talked about the shortcomings of the grid. So look, we can locate the grid in rights of way, which is the roadsides of the highway system. Now, why would we do that? Because folks, we haven't been able we haven't been able to actually install significant new transmission or distribution infrastructure for our grid in about a quarter of a century. Why? Because we focus on overhead transmission, which causes aesthetic concerns and health concerns. And also the land, we have to take the land from people and we end up in court for 20 years or more. Okay, the roadside of the interstate system is ours. It is public land and the infrastructure can be buried. There's a company in Georgia, in fact, Southwire, we partner with them. They make the cables for high voltage AC and high voltage DC grid systems. So with the appropriate motivation of the White House, of the states and the transportation agencies, we can move quickly to expand and enhance the grid in the right of way because it's the land that we already own. So we should decide that we're going to do that. But while we're doing that, look, this is Minnesota's public health data that shows how poverty is still running along the interstate system. Another way of saying that is that the scars of building the highway system are still there and people are living poverty alongside and around the interstate system. If you're living in poverty, you're also living in digital poverty. And so we can go into the roadsides, and I want you to look at this infrastructure. We bury in the fiber, co-located with the transmission. It's an efficient, effective dig once project. And I'm going to blow your mind here. Not only are we going to address clean energy capacity, provide clean energy for clean transportation right there at the highway roadsides where we're going to need big power for BEV freight, for battery electric freight. We can address digital poverty with the same project, and we can prepare our interstate system for connected and autonomous vehicles. There is no other project in 2021 that delivers all of that value. It's digital poverty, workforce development, economic development, right? It is clean transportation, clean energy capacity on the grid system. This is economic development for these areas that could then host data centers, distribution centers. There's enhanced broadband in the greater area. And on top of that, it is necessary for connected and autonomous vehicles to have fiber. And so we prepare the highway for the next generation of vehicles, which will be the safest vehicles that we've ever had. I'm going to have to wrap now because I'm out of time, but I want you to see the map. This is NREL's SEAM study overlaid with the interstate system. NREL, before the Trump administration, NREL released the SEAM study. The SEAM study was basically muzzled during the Trump administration for whatever reason, I don't know. But the NREL work shows how a national grid is necessary and possible at the seams of the regional transmission grids. And if we do this, every dollar that we invest in the national grid, AKA the macro grid, will deliver $1 or $2 in net benefits and enable 85 to 90% renewable energy penetration of the grid. This is the capacity we need for renewable energy. It's the capacity that we need for clean transportation. And we partner these projects with resilient fiber, and we get at connected autonomous vehicle systems, and we address digital poverty in a dig once project portfolio. With that, I'm going to stop because I'm out of time. I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to look longingly at Donald to see if he'll give me any more time. I'm Allie. Reach out to me, Allie@theray.org, ALLIE@theray.org. We are online at the Ray Highway on all social media channels. Come and find me, ask me questions, talk to me, and get involved in our work. We love partnering with Citizens Climate Lobby. Y'all are the best.
Hey, thank you, Allie. That was absolutely spectacular. I think that I think you sold everyone.
We need to go sell Congress. We need to go sell the White House. We can work together on this. This achieves all of our goals. It's environmental and social goals. It's also economic development in the areas that we want to develop, right? We want to develop clean and sustainable, and this is the future. And who knew it was the roadsides? We don't even see that land anymore.
Absolutely. So I got one question for you before we'll kick off. And that's what type of policy do you need to see at the federal level to help streamline this and make it happen?
Yes, I do actually have slides on what can be done at the state level and at the federal level. At the federal level, the DOE is already trying to pull together the agencies that would be necessary, but like other things, we need funding. So, we need funding for the right policies, and we need funding for the right infrastructure. We're working to try to include this in reconciliation. I know that Citizens Climate Lobby is also working to develop policies for reconciliation. I hope there's a way for us to work together. We've asked for $70 billion to do the macro grid. And then the broadband funding that's already been made available in the bipartisan infrastructure bill can be seamlessly paired with the transmission dollars for Dig Once projects.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Allie. I really appreciate it. This is a wonderful presentation. I love your enthusiasm, and your knowledge is just outstanding. So thank you for sharing it with us.
I've had a great time. This is one of the best Saturdays in the fall. It's gorgeous here in Atlanta, and I'm spending it with y'all. It couldn't be any better. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So thank you all so much. And enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.